Yeah, so you have to picture like an amphitheater and with a couple of microphones in the aisles. This is like in Paper Chase, or something. Anyway, and yeah, so he made that statement, and I was being treated at his institution, and I was bald, was in the middle of chemotherapy for my lymphoma, and I'm sitting in the audience. He says, "We sequence all of our patients," and I'm sitting in the audience going, "No, you don't." Because uh, I've asked my oncologist 5 times to get my tissue sequenced, and it hasn't happened. And so I went up to the microphone and said, "I love your institution. I think it's a great institution. I'm sure what you said is exactly your intention and that you've said that. But I'm just going to tell you it's not happening at the front line because, here I am with my bald head from the chemotherapy, and I've asked my oncologist 5 times and it hasn't happened." Uh, and just to sort of tell the rest of that story was people like yourself then walked. I met half a dozen or 10 people saying, "Thank you for adding that dose of reality to this rah rah convention of people that are promoting personalized medicine."
Yeah, yeah. It was a moment for sure. Do you mind sharing for those listening what your diagnosis was?
Yeah, so I had follicular lymphoma, which is, I think, probably the most common form of lymphoma. There are like probably 100 types of lymphoma, which everyone I presume knows is one of the blood cancers. Um, and follicular is characterized by being responsive to treatment. There are a lot of treatment options, and also being effectively a chronic condition that people with it live a normal lifespan typically, but it doesn't. It responds to treatment and then it comes back, and typically in something like 3 to 5 years. And so that's what happened to me. So at that time, I got the chemotherapy. It knocked it down. I had no evidence of disease, and then it came back in about 4 years later. And I then went to a second line of treatment, chose a clinical trial of a innovative. It was a virus that had some antigens on it that were similar to the cancer cells to alert the immune system, and I had a incomplete response or a partial response to that, so I was kicked out of that trial. And then I had 5 options that my oncologist offered to me, and chose from among those um, CAR T, which is a engineered cell therapy that is an immunotherapy.
So I want to back this up for those who are out there who are not necessarily familiar with, lymphomas or the care for, cancer. But follicular lymphoma occurs in your white blood cells, a specific type of white blood cell called your B cells. And what happens is all cancer is characterized by is an uncontrollable growth of those cells, in this case, white blood cells, that eventually will form a mass or what's called a tumor in a person's lymph node. And it's found a number of different ways. As you just shared your treatment journey since then, um, the hallmark of the standard of care is a chemotherapy cocktail with a monoclonal antibody, which is um, a CD120 protein targeting drug. So it's a targeted agent for sure, not as selective as some of the others. And as you also mentioned, follicular lymphoma is usually not considered to be curable, but cancer treating physicians, hematologists in this case, view it as a chronic disease, which means that as long as you continue to respond to therapy, you can maintain a certain quality of life. And fortunately, as you mentioned, there are new innovations in the precision medicine space that are providing new drugs or target that target the immune system or various aspects of the cell replicating process. But one promising opportunity was CAR T therapy. Can you explain, what was CAR T therapy? How was it explained to you, and kind of what was the process?
Yeah, so CAR T, chimeric antigen receptor T cell. So it's um, Basically, when the immune system is working, it recognizes cancer cells as foreign and it kills them. So for some reason, my lymphoma is breaking through that um, defense system. And so, what's going on? Why is my immune system not recognizing and killing these cancer cells? The reason is because it's um, it's not seeing those antigens for one reason or another. And so, what the immunotherapy does is it creates more of um, those antigens that are looking like the cancer cells, just like the COVID vaccine, which was made with mRNA and people may be acquainted with. It was the coronavirus, which meant it had a crown, it had a shape of antigens. And then the mRNA vaccine imitated that. And then the immune system went after the vaccine that you put in and then also got the cancer cells, or in that case, the COVID cells, the virus. So it's the same kind of process. And so what they do is they take out your blood and they pull out your white blood cells. It's called a leukapheresis. And then they send those off to a lab and they take those white blood cells, the T cells, and they engineer them to have, which they can do with genetic engineering. They engineer them to have the antigens that are the same that I have on my cancer cells. Something called CD19, as you mentioned, CD20. And then they reinfuse them. So they infuse them like they uh, put them in through back into my blood system. And then the immune system responds and kills the cancer cells because it recognizes the unique profile of those cancer cells. Um, there's a side effect. So this is not a free lunch, just as with chemotherapy, where you lose your hair and can feel kind of tired and so on. The excitement of the immune system can go overboard. And so you can get what's called a cytokine release syndrome or cytokine storm. And that's an over inflammation response. Your immune system recognizes it's got something foreign in it and goes crazy. And that results in about 60% of the people that get the therapy being hospitalized, as I was. So I had a strong enough reaction. I was being treated outpatient, but because I'm very close to the place where I'm being treated in Boston, um, but I went into the emergency room and was hospitalized for 5 days while they monitored.
Mm. I didn't know that, but today you look strong, you sound strong. We spoke the other day, and your body seems to be responding. Is
Yeah.
that's still the case? And
Yeah, it's sort of like you go through this valley of, it's like if you had a hip replacement, you go through the surgery and you're knocked out for a while, you go for physical therapy and then you're back maybe better than before. So anyway, I'm pretty much back to being good. I'm a little immunocompromised, so I'm taking antibiotics, but otherwise I'm 100% healthy.
it's good to hear. When we first spoke, and you were on a podcast that I was doing at the time, the one thing that really stood out to me in talking to you is the perspective that you had on what happened. When we first spoke of your diagnosis, you said that your thought was, this is going to be something that will help me, which is incredibly empowering. Now, are you just like, everything in life is, half glass half full? Because of my life's journey, I have formed the mindset that what happens to us in life has to happen to either make you the person that you were meant to be, or it comes to prepare you for a purpose that only you can fulfill. You talk about how you arrived at that mindset and how it led you into doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, I have just a kind of unique personality that's whether it's an engineering mindset that I inherited from my father or a philosophical mindset that I developed from playing cards. I play bridge, and when you play bridge, you're dealt a hand, and you play the hand of the best you can. And so you don't get to choose what the cards are that you're dealt. All you can do is play the hand that you're dealt and do the best you can with it. So it's sort of in my mindset, in my DNA, to look at stuff that happens, and if if I can't control it, if I get a scan and it says I have disease, whatever, I can't control that, but I can control my reaction to it. Um, so that's a flavor of the serenity prayer, if you know it, which is to just sort of accept the things you can't control, and not stress or worry about them, and then do what you can with the things that you're with the hand you're dealt. And
It was
I
my
was
mother's
dealt
kitchen growing up.
I was dealt cancer, and so you're dealt lemons, make lemonade. So uh, I had an opportunity, and it was pretty much at that session that you were talking about, where all these people said, "You have a voice. There's something you can do here." I felt it was like a calling. It was something was telling me that this is what my purpose was. This is what I should do, and it hit me at a time of life where it built on things that I was doing and could do, and so I sort of followed it, and made the lemonade from the lemons I was dealt.
Yeah. So you started out doing what you called hackathons, even before, I guess, forming any company. What was the hackathon, and what was kind of the genesis of that idea?
Yeah. So I think even at that session that you and I were both at, they had a patient. You always have a patient, representative on stage to give the patient perspective. And I think it was at that session that Bryce Olson spoke. And Bryce was a very charismatic individual. He was a prostate cancer survivor. Um, he had been through multiple lines of therapy. He wore t-shirts that said sequence me, and he had a group called sequenceme.org. So he was quite a proponent of everyone getting their sequencing at a time, and this was again 6 or 7 years ago, when not everybody was aware of sequencing, and that could influence their cancer treatment. um, I got to know him at that session, got in touch with him. He lived in Portland, Oregon, and became friends. Whenever my wife's family's from Portland, we would go there a couple times a year. I'd see him. We'd have coffee or lunch or something. And he was quite an inspiring figure. He inspired a lot of people. And at a point, I was checking in with him around Christmas. This would have been around 2021, I think. Um, and it was during the pandemic was underway. And he said, "Brad, I've hit a wall. I don't know what to do. I've run out of pathways to treat." And I said, "Well, we could run a hackathon for you," thinking that maybe some innovative person out there in the world would have ideas for him about what to do next. And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So then I had to figure out what to do. What's a hackathon, and how do I do it? And I went to some friends. I went to some people who are now my friends. Pete Kane in particular, who had run some hackathons for some patients, and he sort of gave me the how he had done it, and we designed sort of a weekly meeting, all virtual, using Zoom, where he was, because he was a key opinion leader, he had about I don't know, 25 or 50 people that were advisors that he would want in that conversation, and I had about 25 or 50 people that I
Hmm.
invited, and so we had 50 to 100 people that would participate, on and off in these calls, from leading experts in prostate cancer research to patient advocates to fellow patients and so on. And each session we would walk through what his issue was at the moment. We try and help him sort through what decision he should make.